Yo, how y'all doing, bro? I just checked, but we're at like 158K on the peak video, and we're 2,000 subs away from 10K. I'm not gonna lie, bro. Y'all have been going insane. So naturally, what better way to reward y'all than to not stat pad and be lazy? Plus, I like these little yap sessions we have, bro. We cook around here. Oh, and by the way, before I forget, before we get to the main point of this video, peep this little snippet I got for y'all, bro. Bloody canvas, this blade ain't got no bandwidth. My prey grew out some antlers and escaped me while I'm famished. Look, bitch, I'm not dancing, I'm spazzing from this damage. You can take your block when you get the fuck up off my planet. I share the devil's eyes and the devil's grim, and I take a life and if I let bitch, I'll blind that night, then it would've been the hell and killed you twice. Niggas act like fucking mice, you kiss the strap, got out of mind. Never been one to antagonize, I killed the guy through Adam's eyes. Red blade, put your cuts on display, boy, cannot come play, better stay out the way, boy, big gon' bang. And it sound like grenades, boy, fire on my hip, I keep dragging night flame toys. Yeah, goodbye. I told y'all I was cooking, bro. Oh, and don't worry, I see the DMs, bro. The project does exist. It's not Silk Song, bro. The album exists. And I see a lot of y'all really want the Discord server. Don't worry, it'll drop. We just gotta get the 10K game. But enough about that. That's the boring stuff. You wanna know what I've been thinking of a lot? Like with the recent extended gameplay reveal of Sun Wukong and the recent gameplay reveal of Phantom Blade Zero. I've been thinking about a lot of Souls-like games, and I've been thinking of a lot of like Team Ninja games. And I've been thinking about the Souls-like games that I've just straight up dropped and the ones that I completed like and had a lot of fun with. And even the ones that have the DNA of a Souls-like game, but doesn't go all the way into the formula. Instead of hard focusing on sort of like FromSoft titles, I want to talk about the ones that sort of imitate that style of gameplay. Let's start it off with Code Vein. Now, I'm not gonna lie, I have a love-hate relationship with Code Vein, mainly leaning towards hate for like various reasons, mainly to do with like level design, not really core gameplay mechanics per se. Where I feel like this game really misses the point is it didn't pick out where to put its Dark Souls influence into properly. And I feel like that's very apparent with the level design because like on certain sections it makes you feel like you're playing Devil May Cry, then on like other sections it feels like a Ninja Gaiden game, and only on rare occasions personally do I feel like it feels like a Dark Souls game. And I don't think that's really a good thing because the combat, like the core of the combat, leans so heavily into Dark Souls. But I do understand how like other people would like that type of thing because it still is a breath of fresh air from like the normal Dark Souls pacing of a level. The only time where it like actively aggravated me is like that section of the game where you're at that giant like labyrinth of a White Castle. That was absolutely horrible. And the backtracking you have to do sometimes, and then you have to take into account the speed of the game because it's not like a Sekiro like, so you're not really blitzing through. It's just, it was not fun. And then on the opposite end of the spectrum, a game where I feel like it really excelled from being itself is Nioh, and specifically Nioh 2. Nioh 1 is really good, don't get me wrong, but like Nioh 2 took it to a whole nother level, bro. We all know that. The way armor works and acquiring weapons is definitely akin to Dark Souls, but I don't know, the combat has that little like extra layer on top of it that really excels it and makes it a fun game. And all the yokai are very cool too, and very good lore as well. It definitely is a very solid game that just builds off of Dark Souls, and not in like a very glaring way or anything, don't get me wrong, but like I'm talking about like, you know, the core of the game. And then we go to my favorite FromSoft game, which is Sekiro, and then we look at the games that are like influenced by it. So like Wukong Fallen Dynasty, for example, it takes a parry system and adds a bit more sauce to it, but it pretty much does the same exact thing. I mean, I like the animation like a bit more because it's just cooler in general, but it really does do the same thing. This game adds in like a little mechanic where you can have allies and they can help you in the boss battle. My only issue with that is that sometimes, I'm not gonna lie, it makes it a little bit more easy. But to be honest, it's a choice, so you don't have to do it, so it's not really like a problem. Instead of having like prosthetic tools or anything like in Sekiro, you just straight up have magic. So, I mean, you can do like elemental attacks and stuff. I mean, it's pretty cool. It's definitely like, I'm glad they didn't go the route of just straight up like, you know, biting. But some of these skills are kind of like lame, I'm not gonna lie. There's multiple like types of weapons and you have armor like traditional Souls-like games, but the combat kind of just, you know, is in the vein of Sekiro, which is pretty cool to see that fusion. I mean, the fact that the magic is kind of like lackluster, to me personally, doesn't really take away from the game, because at the end of the day, the core combat can pretty much stand up on its own. I didn't care for the story that much, but it wasn't going for like some like grandiose, like, you know, Elden Ring level of like layering within the story, so it's fine, it gets a pass. For a first shot at like a game with Sekiro's DNA, it was pretty good in my opinion. And then we go to like, you know, the other side again. We look at a game that was already made by FromSoft with Dark Souls DNA, Bloodborne, and then we look at a game that's even more like, you know, condensed into that DNA of Bloodborne, Lies of P. And Lies of P is a really like unique case. It's really cool because like, okay, the combat of course is pretty good. I mean like it's your standard like Souls-like combat with a little bit of spice here and there to of course differentiate itself to give you a reason to, you know, do it. But the lore of the game really brings it up for me personally because it's already, you know, like a retelling of like a classic story, you know, Pinocchio, stuff like that. So you got your references, pretty cool. And then like, you know, instead of doing like the Alice in Wonderland Twisted Magic, I forgot the name. I think it was like Twisted Magic. Yeah, I had to Google it, bro. It's not called Twisted Madness. It's called Madness Returns. But like, it goes for like a more darker, like gritty, berserk type tone because it is a Dark Souls like type of game at the end of the day, and it just made it really fun to like go through it and absorb like everything within the game, of course. Now with Bloodborne, I'm not the biggest Bloodborne fan, but I do get the appeal of Bloodborne. It just wasn't, you know, I don't know, it didn't really like hit for me. So seeing this game, you know, it put a smile on my face for sure. But one thing that I just couldn't like shake, like with the like influx of all these like Dark Souls, you know, Souls-like type games, Sekiro Souls-like type games, it's just like left this aching feeling like, where's this for Ninja Gaiden? Because like, I'll admit, if I'm sleeping, then I'm definitely just sleeping and I just haven't seen like the ones that are like hidden gems. But I really like Ninja Gaiden. I wanted to see like some games that were like in the vein of that. I like Devil May Cry or anything like that, but Ninja Gaiden, you know? So flashback many months back, I'm in the VC with my friends, right? And we're all watching the state of play. I'm not gonna lie, aside from like the Spider-Man 2 reveal, I think this was the state of play with the Spider-Man 2 reveal as well. We were kind of just like, you know, just another state of play, right? Like, come on, let's be for real. It's pretty boring, like most of them are. And then I see Phantom Blade Zero, and I'm just like, wait, hold on. What is this? The game's super flashy. It seems seamless between like, you know, a cutscene and like combat, like every other like PlayStation game, but to a different level. Like it seemed like more gameplay than cutscene, right? And it was hard to differentiate like what parts were automated and what parts weren't because, you know, we didn't have a HUD. So naturally, me and my friend right, we go like look into this game and we see that the studio has nothing like under its belt, and you know, we're curious. We're like, bro, is this gonna be one of those games that just like dies because the dev like doesn't exist and it's like a little pipe dream, right? And then my friend Kino's like, nah, bro, have faith. And I'm just so cynical at the time for like, because Sony, you know, has burned me many times in the past. I'm so cynical, right? And then flash forward, like, I don't know, recently, and I'm in VC with Kino, right? And we see Phantom Blade Zero in this new combat reveal, and he streams it. And we're just sitting there like, bro, there's no way this game exists. We were watching Maximilian dude's like video on it. Shout out Max, bro, super goated, bro. I love Max. I want to meet him one day, bro. And then he was just like covering the game and then giving tidbits that the dev was talking about. And the dev was like, I really like Dark Souls games, right? But I can't stand the combat. And I really like Ninja Gaiden games, but some of the sequencing in the level was like up, you know? And he was like, I really like Sekiro. And then I'm like, bro, okay. What else did he say? And then he was like, I wanted to make a game that was like an amalgam of like Dark Souls levels, right? Because the level design is really good in Dark Souls games, but the combat is more akin to Ninja Gaiden, and then it has like that, like, you know, factor of Sekiro of constant offense between defense switching, and it translated perfectly with the gameplay we saw. The way you can interact with the stages, the options you can choose against enemies, it feels like everything that we wanted in a game like this. It feels like a perfect like successor to Ninja Gaiden in a way, a perfect evolution of that formula, you know? But that's one side of the platinum coin, right? That's one side of the coin. Okay, now let me flip it over and show you the other side of the coin, okay? Take Bloodborne, take Sekiro, then take Nioh, and then what do you get out of that? Well, you, my friend. Okay, by the way, canon from the future here, I'm very stupid, so even though I was literally staring at the name in front of me, I kept calling Black Myth Wukong Sun Wukong. Please ignore that for this section. Get Sun Wukong, the yin to Phantom Blade Zero's yang, in my opinion. See, where Phantom Blade Zero would have like, you know, the flashy parrying where it's very aggressive combat, Sun Wukong will have perfect like step dodges and perfect rolls that set up for like small little clone animations that like very briefly slow down time, kind of like Nier Automata, you know how 2B has her perfect dodge or whatever. And instead of just, you know, in a normal Dark Souls game where it's just like time this roll correctly, in Wukong is more nuanced than that, much more nuanced, because that game has actual combos and then they sped up the speed, you know. That's where the Sekiro influence comes in, right? And then you see like in, you know, Phantom Blade Zero, the parrying mechanic is very offensive. And then in, you know, Sun Wukong, the parry mechanic is more akin to Bloodborne in a sense. So it's crazy how these two divergent games can, you know, differ so much, but both of them start with Dark Souls in their influence. It's all about how you apply that influence, you know. It's kind of like Bomb Rush and Jet Set Radio. Of course, Bomb Rush is a spiritual successor to Jet Set Radio, but anybody that's played like both know they're playing completely different, bro. So for example, like a recent example, it's like Nine Souls and Hollow Knight. Nine Souls takes heavy influence from Sekiro with its parry system and how reliant that game is on parrying and timing and comboing correctly. But you know, Hollow Knight is more of just, you know, timing your dodges correctly and taking your hits in when you can, and resource management with your soul meter. So one game is like Dark Souls of, you know, the 2D Metroidvania, and then the other one is like Sekiro of 2D Metroidvanias. It's really cool, like how you can see how these things, like, you know, relate to each other. It's really cool. I'm not finna lie, bro, I came to that conclusion by accident, but that really is a perfect way to describe it. Bro, see, this is why I just do videos unscripted, bro. When you start spitballing, I feel like it's just easier to build onto ideas in that way. And low-key, on the topic of that Hollow Knight thing, I feel like that's like a very healthy way to see things. Instead of seeing Nine Souls as like, oh, this is an obligatory like Hollow Knight clone, right? The mechanics in the game go much deeper than that, right? So another game, for example, with Crow Swarm, you see the Bloodborne influence in that one, the DMC influence in that one, and even sometimes the Ninja Gaiden influence in that game. So you have these three sides to it. You have Hollow Knight, Dark Souls, you have Nine Souls, which is, you know, Sekiro adjacent, and then you have like Crow Swarm, which is more Bloodborne and DMC adjacent. Of course, we haven't gotten our hands on Crow Swarm. There was like a, you know, little demo for certain people. I think it was a Kickstarter demo, actually, a Kickstarter demo. But you can see with Hollow Knight and Nine Souls clearly that those games play completely different, and I feel like that's how it's gonna be with Crow Sword. Of course, the DNA is in all of them, but I feel like it's okay. It's not directly biting, it's more paying homage and building onto the mechanics that are already there. Now, I was just in VC, but like I'm back now, what's up? And my friends actually brought up like a really good example. Another Crab's Treasure. Now, personally, I haven't played this game, but I have a friend named Shmuley that's like nearly 100% completed it, cracked at the game. And it's a very good take on the Souls-like formula, because it's heavily influenced by Dark Souls, right? But it speeds up the game, and then, you know, for armor, since it's like a game about crabs, it's pretty cartoony, it's pretty cool. Instead of having like traditional armor, you use a shell, right? So it makes for like some goofiness, and it gives leeway to just so much freedom within the game. It's a breath of fresh air from like Souls-like games that take themselves super duper serious with the story and, you know, the setting, but the game takes itself serious with its combat and mechanics within it, and make for like a very fun game. So definitely check it out, bro. Another Crab's Treasure is goated. I don't know, bro, it sounds good for like a first live stream or something, like playing the game and then having y'all watch me die 2,000 times and then break my controller. And now it's time for my favorite part of these vids, putting y'all onto some really good slept on artists. I got some good ones today. I feel like y'all like actually like these. To start it off, we got Akko. She primarily makes pop, but what I really like about like her music specifically is the fact that she does not shy away from adding that guitar in. It's just slightly filtered, but you can still hear some of the harshness with the peaks of it, which makes for some pretty unique songs. It's especially apparent on the song called Planet, the way that you can hear like the electric guitar in the background and then you hear the strings lead into the drop from the bridge. It's really good sequencing. Definitely my like favorite song from her, and the most popular song for her is All to Myself, and this one heavily leans into like the rock sound, but it's kind of like lo-fi-esque, but the vocals aren't really lo-fi-esque, they're more pop vocals. All around a song that kind of sounds like a fusion between like bedroom rock or pop, but instead of it being as harsh as those two or even like leaning into indie, it instead just kind of like goes under, you know, like it wettens it but doesn't like muddy it too much. And next up we have Yu Miyashita, and I'm not even gonna lie, bro, he has my favorite vocals of all time. Like, you really have to hear it to believe it. The range is incredible. And as you probably could have guessed, the song that I'm about to mention, if you've ever heard of him, that is Wazwal. The beat evolves multiple times throughout the duration of the song, and it perfectly just like meshes with his vocals because he's very dynamic with how he uses them. Also, his breath control is absolutely insane. Like, another example of a song, matter of fact, while we're on the topic of that, is one called Non-Breath Oblige. It's a cover of like a Vocaloid song, just like Wazwal, and it's also very good. Like, I'd heavily recommend this artist. I'm not gonna lie, Wazwal is in like my top 3 songs of all time, and that's saying a lot because I listen to a lot of music. So I feel like if it has that type of stamp of approval, you should definitely peep it. Matter of fact, scratch like the individual song recommendations from him. Just go ahead and listen to the whole discography so you can like fully understand what I'm talking about. And with that, our time together comes to a close. And I really like their like Dark Souls discussion. I feel like that was like really fun to cover. And to this day, I still don't know how to end videos.
Up in here with my tool, they gon' find you in the ditch, yeah. Straight for high rule, you not from it, you a glitch, yeah. Man of my rules, running with the misfits, yeah. Do not misclick, that's gon' get you hit quick, yeah. Death on death, this God, ain't no variation, it's Lord X Lord. I keep a paradise, so I X out of Clyde. My name Lucy, when I talk, you know. Space Channel 556, going coast to coast, tryna run off on this lid, no Leo code, palm tree, painted how the pole dance when it blow. Crawling for their rupees, yeah, they look like ants on the floor. Shotty at my waistband, so to get a face can. 5 kicks, all on my still not using day hands. My rib on a 5 look like you faking. Cause I'm sharp to the depths, so